Hello, welcome to CGTN. This is our special coverage on Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Brazil. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Deng.
And I'm Li Dongning. Well, President Xi Jinping will arrive soon in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit.
This will be President Xi Jinping's first visit to the Latin American country in 5 years. He will join world leaders to address pressing global issues at the summit.
And President Xi will then travel to Brasilia for a state visit to bolster bilateral cooperation.
And we'll take a deeper look into how G20 provides a platform for nations to collaborate on shaping a more just and more inclusive global economic order. And
how China and Brazil are deepening ties amid evolving challenges worldwide. And first of all, let's check in with our reporter Wu Lei in Rio de Janeiro. Wu Lei, so tell us the vibe there.
Hello, Dongning. We're now in the crossroads of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to arrive in the city very soon. And you can feel the excitement here, and there are hundreds of people who have been living and working here in the city, and we just talked to some of them, and they said some of them coming from the city and some are from another city called São Paulo. We know São Paulo is the largest city in Brazil, and they have been working here for several years, and today they travel here exclusively to welcome Chinese president. And many of them say they are hoping that the president's visit will further boost the bilateral relations between China and Brazil. And you can see they are holding the national flags of China and Brazil, and also a lot of signs showing warmly welcome Chinese President Xi Jinping, and also long live the Sino-Brazilian friendship. So you can feel the excitement, and people are waiting here for the arrival of the Chinese president.
Still focusing on Rio, and let's cross live to our correspondent Paula Cabral, standing by at the G20 Summit's International Media Center. Paula, you've been following this gathering of the leaders of the world's largest economies very closely. Tell us more about the key items on the agenda this year.
Well, yes, certainly we have been following it very closely, and now we are arriving at the moment here at the venue in Rio de Janeiro. Let me just show you first, if you see that blue structure there on the back written G20, that's exactly where the leaders are going to go through to get them into the venue of the meetings themselves. You know that Brazil is not only hosting G20 this year, but also is presiding the G20, and in that position Brazil was tasked with deciding what would be the key themes to be discussed. And there are three main axes. One of them is sustainable development and energy transition. It is something that Brazil gives a lot of attention to internally, particularly having to do with clean fuel. Another aspect also is the fight against poverty and against social inequality. President Lula has actually launched what he called a global alliance against hunger, and brought the suggestion of some kind of tax to be levied on the super rich around the world. And the third theme is the reform of global governance. That includes also the Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF, like the World Bank, and also the United Nations. The Security Council is also a very delicate and controversial issue. So these are the three main axes that we have to discuss here: sustainable development and energy transition, fighting poverty and inequality, and finally the reform of global governance. All of that to happen here in Rio de Janeiro from tomorrow.
Paulo, what can we expect from President Xi Jinping's stay in Rio de Janeiro?
Well, look, of course, we can only know what's going to happen once it happens, once President Xi Jinping comes here to the venue and speaks. But of course, we can make some inferences considering what are priorities for China that we see in their international policy. And we do know that China pays a lot of attention to issues connected to social justice and to poverty reduction. China has a great example of having lifted about 800 million people from poverty. So this is possibly one of the highlights of what China, of what President Xi Jinping is going to bring here to the venue, to this discussion. As we were saying, it is one of the three main axes of discussion here in the G20, and it's one of them that China is very much likely to pay a lot of attention and to focus on. But again, All the details we'll know tomorrow when the event actually starts. And of course, we're going to be here to report all back to you.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent Paulo Cabral standing by the G20 Summit Media Center.
Right, and it seems that according to our reporters that this G20 summit is going to be a very packed event, and President Xi is going to arrive in Rio de Janeiro for that event. And let's learn more about the host city of Rio de Janeiro, known for its beauty and vibrant culture. This city also highlights a stark social and economic divides. These contrasts are central to Brazil-led discussions pushing for fair contributions from wealthy nations to combat poverty, racism, and also the climate crisis. Now, Lucas Franco reports.
Host to one of the world's biggest annual parties and some of the most recognized music, samba and bossa nova, by day Rio de Janeiro is a city of spectacular vistas, home to one of the world's 7 modern wonders, a former architecture capital of the world, site of the first global climate summit in 1992, and recently in 2014, a World Cup, and in 2016, the Olympic Games.
Rio is absolutely breathtaking. The experience so far has been, amazing. Everyone is very welcoming.
Under Portuguese rule, Rio de Janeiro became the colonial capital of Brazil in 1763. Fleeing Napoleon's army in 1808, King João VI brought the royal court to Rio, where it served as the seat of the Portuguese Empire until 1821. Following Brazil's independence in 1822, Rio remained the nation's capital until 1960. With a greater metropolitan population of 16 million people, it is still the city that most symbolizes Brazil the world over, and yet to the careful observer, even on its sun-soaked beaches, there is another, lesser-known Rio on display. As much as it's known for its breathtaking beauty and its ability to host major events, Rio's story is really of 2 cities. Everywhere there are reminders of a past that was literally constructed on the backs of forced African labor. A recently excavated port where, according to estimates, nearly 1 million slaves arrived. Cobblestone streets, churches built with granite cut and fitted on site. According to historian Milton Teixeira, that legacy created a divide that today continues to characterize the city.
Here in Rio de Janeiro, you have an urban culture of streets and buildings, and then there is the culture of the favelas. It has not always been a peaceful relationship. In fact, much of the time it has been highly conflictive. You have a class that has access to consumer goods and another that doesn't.
So behind the postcard views and opulence, Rio is also a city of poverty, sprawling favela slums, where most recently drug-related violence is all too common and opportunity is far too scarce. It is on this other Rio and the impoverished around the world that the G20 leaders have now set their sights for the summit. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
We're watching live footage from Rio de Janeiro. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to arrive in the Brazilian city very soon, and he's there to attend the G20 summit, as we've been reporting, and he will also pay a state visit to Brazil. Now we can see that a plane of Chinese President Xi Jinping has landed in Rio de Janeiro. This is live footage from the Brazilian city. The city of Rio de Janeiro is hosting this year's G20 summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just arrived in Rio de Janeiro to attend the G20 summit this year. And the theme for this year's G20 gathering is building a just world and a sustainable planet.
Well, this significant visit not only underscores the growing strength of a China-Brazil comprehensive strategic partnership, but also seeks to leverage Brazil's role as Latin America's largest economy to drive progress in global governance and also multilateral cooperation. And President Xi's visit comes as China and Brazil actually celebrates the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations. And in his signed article published in Fala de São Paulo, titled "A Friendship Spanning Vast Oceans, a Voyage," he highlighted the enduring bond between the two nations. He said the China-Brazil relations have withstood the test of changing international landscape and become increasingly mature and vibrant. And this dynamic relationship has not only boosted their respective development, but also contributed significantly to both peace and stability.
And you're watching live footage from Rio de Janeiro. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just arrived at the Brazilian city to attend the G20 summit there. And after that, he will pay a state visit to Brazil, and he's expected to visit Brazilian capital of Brasilia. And according to the Chinese government, President Xi Jinping's attendance at this year's G20 summit demonstrates China's strong support for multilateralism and the high importance it attaches to G20 cooperation. And it's a widely shared expectation that the G20 will play its role as the premier forum for international economic forum. So Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in the city to attend the G20 summit. Now Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Rio de Janeiro. This is live footage from the Brazilian city, which is hosting this year's G20 summit. And after his attendance at the G20 summit, President Xi Jinping will also pay a state visit to Brazil. As we can see that the national flags of the two countries are flying high as a welcoming symbol to Chinese President Xi Jinping's arrival.
And as our reporters earlier said, that the atmosphere, the vibe in the city to welcome the arrival of President Xi is very hospitable as well, with all the banners and flags, Chinese flags, flapping in the very crisp weather that Rio de Janeiro is enjoying today. And President Xi is going to be welcomed by high-ranking officials from the Brazilian government. And later he will attend the G20 summit that is coming up very soon and make a keynote speech there. And afterwards he will officially kick off a state visit to the country and will meet Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil, for talks, and also agreements are reportedly going to be signed between the two sides as well.
And as we just reported, China and Brazil have this comprehensive strategic partnership. Trade between the two countries has been very strong and growing steadily. And what about cultural exchanges? This also plays a central role in ties between the two sides. Still going back to that signed article by Chinese President Xi Jinping published in a Brazilian newspaper, a major Brazilian newspaper ahead of his arrival, he said the Amazon and the Yangtze River of China symbolize our shared commitment to ecological conservation and cultural exchanges. By deepening mutual understanding, we build a solid foundation for enduring friendship.
Deixa
President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has taken an exclusive interview with CGTN. President Lula shares the key topics on the agenda, expressing optimism that the summit will be both productive and amicable.
Let's talk about the upcoming G20. President Lula, that is a very big thing on the agenda of your presidency. What are the top priorities of the upcoming G20 in Rio? How will this summit help resolve pressing global issues? For example, aligning the agenda of the summit with the needs of developing countries and the global south.
Nós primeiros estamos lançando a Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, que é uma coisa que eu acho extraordinária e não é apenas para os países do G20, é para todos os países do mundo. Depois nós estamos discutindo muito a questão da transição energética e a questão climática, porque já está provado que não tem espaço para o ser humano viver fora do planeta Terra. Então, ao invés de ficar procurando outro planeta, nós temos que tentar fazer com que o planeta Terra tenha uma qualidade de água, uma qualidade de ar, para que a gente possa viver dignamente e decentemente. Depois a gente quer rediscutir o sistema de Bretton Woods, ou seja, o papel dos bancos financeiros como FMI e Banco Mundial, que hoje eles não são utilizados para favorecer os países em desenvolvimento que precisam de financiamento. São bancos utilizados para sufocar os países pobres. Hoje a África tem uma dívida de 900 bilhões de dólares. O que eles pagam de juro é mais do que eles têm capacidade de investimento no desenvolvimento. E eu estou defendendo uma ideia de que parte dessa dívida que os países africanos têm com o FMI seja transformada em investimentos em infraestrutura na África. E vamos ter, pela primeira vez, a gente vai ter uma coisa chamada, empoderamento feminino, fazendo com que as mulheres possam efetivamente participar de forma igualitária nas coisas políticas que o mundo decide. Então eu estou muito otimista que vai ser um G20 muito produtivo, muito cordial e vai ser, eu acho que um aprendizado para todos nós. Além do que, muita gente vai conhecer o Rio de Janeiro pela primeira vez